Hello, Mel. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview with us today. And Michelle, lovely to have you as my co-interviewer. So we'll just do a few little introductions just to start. So I'm the founder and coach, trainer, facilitator, what have you, at RiverRhee. And we're doing this series because it's fascinating to explore what individuals have been doing in their work and in their lives to enable them to realize their potential, or indeed to help others realize their potential. So that's what this series is all about. And I'd like to ask Michelle if you'd like to just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll come on to you, Mel.
Thank you, Elisabeth. So I'm head of blended learning for OBRIZUM Group, which is an edtech in Cambridge. And my prior career has always been in life science. So I have a lot of interest in life science careers, what to do after your PhD, how to navigate your postdoc, and in particular, what I'm interested in is what people can do during their PhDs and postdocs to help guide their careers and to help them to explore other opportunities outside of academia. And so that's me.
Lovely, thank you. So Mel, yes, it'd be great to hear who you are and very broadly what kind of things you'd like to explore with us in this interview today.
Thank you. I'm Melanie Boyle, and I'm a VP of Project Management at a biotech company in Cambridge called Kymab. I've spent 20 years in the biologics, drug discovery and drug development environment, initially as a senior scientist in antibody engineering at Cambridge Antibody Technology, and then moving into research project management and then development project management in Medimune AstraZeneca. So really it was to talk about confidence today. It's something that I feel that I've always had, well, not battled with, that's too strong a word, but I wouldn't say that I was a massively confident person. And it's really to sort of share some thoughts about things that you can do to help your career, particularly when you're lacking in confidence. I've been really helped along the way with advice from some great people, and then also really just to talk about some of the things I've picked up along the way.
That's such an important theme, because when we feel confident, then we're more able to realize our potential. So there's a really strong link there, Mel. And as we go into this interview, who do you feel would be most interested in, who would you like to share your story with?
So I think as you get older, you definitely get a bit more confident. I mean, I wouldn't like to say, you kind of become 100% confident, but I think particularly, when you're younger, you definitely question yourself a lot more. And so it's also, I think, for people who are at key points in their career, maybe they're looking for new opportunities, or they're thinking about, what they want to do, but maybe, lacking in some confidence, kind of thinking, how do you create those opportunities?
Yeah, that sounds really good. So maybe we could do a little bit of a story, Mel, of kind of milestones in your career where perhaps the confidence aspect has been particularly important.
Yeah, so one thing that sort of sticks in my mind, and this was sort of when I was at school, actually, so this is a long time ago, when we're just starting to think about going to university, and the older sister of a really good friend of mine, who we were all a little bit frightened of, just came up to me and said, "Oh, Mel, are you going to apply for Oxford?" And I just was sort of astounded, really, A, that she'd actually talked to me, but also that she'd even asked me that question. And I said, "No, of course not." And she said, "But why not?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I haven't really sort of even thought about it." And she said, "Well, you should, because otherwise you'll never know." And it was something about this phrase, "you'll never know," and it just sort of sort of stuck with me, and I just kept thinking about it all the time. And so actually I did apply, and it was just that phrase, "You'll never know." And I've tried to kind of use that sort of along the way when you're really doubting yourself. And then even just sort of a very recent example, that I applied for a fellowship with the Association of Project Management, and even when I was, actually filling out the form, I felt actually really quite nervous in terms of, if I send it in, will people laugh, but I did, I sent it in, I sort of, again, the same phrase, "You'll never know." I sent it in, and I came back positive. So I was really sort of 50-50 whether I was even going to send the application in. And now I look back and I think, well, what, why was I so concerned? So I think, those have just been, well, examples from right at the beginning, and then examples just very recently, and that phrase still holds true for me. And I think we're all, to some extent, sort of fearful of failure, aren't we? But actually, you have nothing to lose in trying these things or applying for things, and therefore, go for it. And that's, I think, what in a way I wish that I could have said to my younger self, which is just, go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it, and you'll never know. I really like that. And you mentioned this other thing, Mel, which is that you are a fellow of the APM, the Association for Project Management, and congratulations for that. And I haven't double checked, but I know that there are not many women who are fellows, and I don't believe there are many people in the life sciences who are fellows. So that's really quite significant in those ways as well. So Michelle, I was wondering whether there's anything yet from what Mel has said which is triggering any thoughts in your mind.
No, definitely. I feel the same. I would say that I have those same doubts. Like if I think about applying for the current position I have now, I remember thinking, oh, I don't have the experience, I don't have this. And it's almost like you're trying to talk yourself out of things. And I think it's very true. If you don't try, you never know. And I think, to echo what you have both said, I think that the only way to do something, or there's a saying, isn't there, the only failure is to not try. Because actually you have to try, and you and things will evolve, and it's something we've been talking about recently, is that things evolve and things change, and you make things better, but the only way to make things better is to have something written on paper in the first, or whatever it may be, or to try or to do those things, is to have the initial thoughts, but you have to act on them as well.
So I'm hearing kind of make a commitment either on paper, do an action, tell somebody. Yeah. So Mel, you mentioned, the older sister of a friend being such a strong influence, and unexpectedly she just came up to you. What other people, in what other ways have people had an influence perhaps on your confidence and your development in your career?
I mean, I think, there's definitely been certain people who've created an opportunity. I think, one of the ways to gain more opportunities, it's actually about visibility, particularly in large organizations. That can be quite difficult. And I think if there's somebody, it might be your boss, it might be somebody else, if you can take part in, let's say, a work stream or initiative which is across the company. So it's a mix of people from maybe different locations, different functions, different areas of the business. That can make a really big difference, because you're meeting new people and you're being part of a, a cross-functional company-wide initiative. And then not only are you meeting new people, you're finding out about different areas of the business, and you might be interested in some of those things. You're increasing your visibility, and then ultimately you're also increasing your own self-confidence, because you're sort of putting yourself more out there. So one piece of advice I would offer to people is to say, if you're sort of feeling that you're maybe quite invisible in an organization, particularly large organizations, is to volunteer to be part of a work stream, across the company. And that can be, can open many doors. I think in a smaller organization, in some ways, as long as you're talking to people, even just at the coffee machine, although obviously we're not doing that so much at the moment, but if you're just sort of talking to people, and you go to various talks or whatever, actually I think it is a bit more easy. I think it's easier to have for people to know about you.
So achieving that visibility, finding ways to connect with other people, volunteering to take part in multi-stream activities, work streams, just trying to find the word there. Yeah, that all sounds really good advice. And I guess your area of work is project management. So does that lend itself even more easily to do this kind of cross-functional networking, working?
I think so. I mean, it's one of the sort of skills that is expected of a project manager anyway. I think to be able to work with different groups, sort of working with a team. So I think that tends to be part of your skill set. But I think you get comfortable, don't you? You get comfortable working with certain groups of people or certain parts of the organization, and sort of taking a step beyond that can be quite hard sometimes.
Yeah, so there is something about visibility and also going outside of your comfort zone. Yeah. And
then talking about sort of other people, I think your peers are also so important. And one of the things you hear quite a lot, there's lots of sort of books out there, around how to make yourself more confident, or how to be successful. And one of the things I always talk about is networking.
Yeah.
And I always have this vision in my head of sort of having to go to some kind of networking event where you don't know a single person, and you have to sort of sidle up to somebody and sort of say hello, and start having a conversation with them, and then also start telling them about yourself. And that's not something that I would naturally want to do. But when you think about your own colleagues, all the different people that you've worked with, friends, your own sort of community, actually that's your network. And so you have a bigger network than you think you do. And then of course there's all the sort of the internet side of things as well, which allows people to make connections to an even greater extent as well. So I think sometimes people think that you have to somehow go out and make this massive network related to your career or job, but actually you've got a bigger network than you think you have.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to pause there, Michelle, and see whether these themes of visibility, networking, whether that's resonating with you in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even, as a scientist, and even in my job now, networking and making new connections is really important. And I'm like, Mel, definitely, being in a room full of people I don't know is very daunting. And you're right. I think there are also other ways of making connections that can make you feel much more comfortable. And I think sometimes just going to an event with somebody can help you just give that kind of that confidence, especially if they can introduce you to people. And I guess it always depends on what event it is, but yeah, I'm definitely it makes me nervous to say the least. But it's, yeah, when you're in that role, you have, it's something that you have to do. It's just trying to not feel bad if you don't go about it the traditional way, let's say.
Yeah, actually, I just want to chip in there because there's some good resources out there for networking for introverts, and I always remember reading tips like actually look for the other people who are on their own, because the chances are they'd be, you know, only too glad to have a conversation with you. It's amazing, you know, we're just talking amongst ourselves, but how many people actually do feel a bit nervous about sort of just making that first step in a social networking environment, or actually introducing, as you said, Michelle, if you take someone who will introduce you, but actually if you go and introduce people to each other, they'll really be grateful to you for that. And another one is if you're genuinely interested in the other person, that gets rid of the nerves as well. Just wanting to find out about the other person, and then the conversation will just flow as well. So, but yeah, there's some good resources out there. But Mel, that's great. So we've sort of explored a couple of themes here already: confidence, networking, visibility. What else has been important to you in terms of your career, progressing your career?
I think training and just having, you know, some sort of qualifications that, you know, you can add to your CV. You know, when I sort of started off in science, you know, obviously, you know, you do a degree, you do a PhD, you do, you know, a postdoc, or, you know, or whatever, and you sort of follow those qualifications, and that's sort of fairly is well known and understood, isn't it?
Yes.
Sort of when you go beyond that, then the question is, what do you need any more qualifications? Maybe you don't. I know certainly after I finished my PhD, I thought I'm never doing any more qualifications. But you know, so I had a number of years where, you know, I was working or whatever. But when I sort of moved into research project management, I wasn't aware at that point really of any sort of project management qualifications. And then, you know, the Association of Project Management were running various different courses, and I actually thought, you know, it would be quite good to have some of the theory that sits behind the things that we're doing every day. And sort of going on that course, doing that qualification, I learned a lot, and I think it's part of it is, rather than the feeling that you're sort of making it up as you go along, that there is actually a real body of information out there, and it has the language. You know, it gives you the language and the terminology, which I think helps when you're having those conversations with different individuals within the organisation. So I think having some of those qualifications, going on courses through your career, I think helps too. I think it gives you that confidence that you do actually know what you're talking about.
That's a really good point. And I guess this relates to, as you say, credibility, you know, confidence in yourself, but also projecting credibility in your interactions with others. And I know this is something we've talked about before, Mel, so I was wondering whether we could sort of draw that out a little bit more in terms of, you know, what you've done that has helped to build your credibility and enabled you to progress in your career to the position that you now have.
Project management it's interesting in science. I think, you know, people think of project management in different ways. You know, it goes right from people assuming that you are sort of admin and, you know, just taking the minutes, right the way through to actually, you know, having a strategic role within the team.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, you know, even now, sort of having been in the business for 20 years, you know, whenever you talk with different people, they all have a different view of what they think your role should be.
Yeah.
And so the way that I've always sort of tried to approach this is thinking about how do you add value to well, particularly the project, because obviously that's the focus, and the organisation. Because one thing that I've come across a lot is people worry that you're just adding levels of bureaucracy. It's going to slow down the science. So I think particularly in the research side of things, people worry about that a lot. That you're going to sort of be there with the clipboard, ticking things off, and that makes people very nervous because they worry that's going to sort of stifle innovation. In development, it's more sort of a project management is part of the project team, and that's very accepted. I think particularly because you've got many activities, many functions coming together. There's always a tight timeline. There's always risk. There's a lot of money that's invested in this. So some of those project management skills and techniques are really important as part of a development project team.
You've kind of wrapped that quite neatly in terms of the qualification in project management, which has given you the language and the credibility and I guess the resource of things to draw upon, but then taking that very pragmatic approach in how you offer that to a smaller organisation, people working in research, to add value, provide benefits. So that's a really nice package of what you've shared there.
And that's why I really like going to sort of conferences in particular, or hearing webinars, not only from people who are within the sort of biotech pharmaceutical industry, because that's always interesting, but also beyond that. I really like hearing from people who work, I don't know, the Ministry of Defence, in procurement, or the construction industry, which is, really tight on their timelines and everything, coming together at exactly the right moment. Things like that. I love hearing all the things that they're doing, because they use some of those tools a lot more because it suits their industry, or it's where they have a higher degree of risk, and they'll have some really sophisticated tools that are available, and we're only just touching on them a tiny amount. But I really like hearing about that, because then makes you sort of think about, is that something that would be worth us considering? Or maybe it's just not appropriate. So that's one of the things I like doing, is hearing from, a wide, diverse group across all industries, because I think you can learn a lot from that.
Yeah, I can see your enthusiasm coming through, Mel. So Michelle, I'm just wondering whether, this whole topic that we just talked about here, about, getting qualifications that give you confidence, give you credibility, enable you to then tap into, to add value in what you're doing. If there's anything that's coming out from there that resonates with you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have the so even if it's not formal training, just to do the reading, particularly when you go away from what you've trained to do and you're doing something slightly different. And what Mel said, definitely being able to speak the language is really important. And I found that going into a more business role, that actually there's so many terms that people would be saying, and I'm sat there going, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And there I'm busy Googling, like, what does that mean? But I think once you, and sometimes it's even just reading a book or whatever it may be, just to give you that extra confidence, and to make you feel like you can hold your own in a conversation without sounding silly, because it's all well and good knowing the words, but you have to know when to use the words at the right time. But Mel, I actually have a question, if that's okay. So you gave lots of great advice about networking, and in particular advice about joining internal schemes within the company. but these things will take time. And so I'm interested to know what you think is the right way to balance the time between, because I think sometimes you can get distracted by other things. And I'm a big advocate. I think that people should always be doing something on the side, but I'm interested to know from your experience how do you keep that balance?
I mean, obviously, you know, projects always come first above everything else, you know, and driving those projects forward is absolutely the number one. And obviously the team as well, you know, that the team is working well together. So that always is number one. I think, you know, I've often, I would say probably always done extra, you know, you always do extra, don't you? And quite often, if you take on something else like let's say a cross-organization work stream, you actually really are sort of doing it in your own time. Now, some organizations do have time allocated, you know, for sort of training and development. So that's great if you can use some of that time, but I think quite often everybody's busy, aren't they? People are always busy. So, you know, sometimes, you know, I've taken on extra things, and I am effectively doing it in my own time. And I think one of the things we haven't talked about, but is really important, is actually having, you know, people who are more senior than you in the organization, who are really supportive and actually put you forward. And when they hear things, you know, they think, oh yes, you know, we could volunteer this person, or, you know, or who's sort of working on your behalf as well, looking for opportunities, and you know, they're really important too.
And in some organisations, they actually formalise that as mentors or sponsors to work with. So that's another discussion that we might get into on another day. So we're coming to the end of the interview, Mel. I just want to check whether there's anything else that we've missed that you wanted to share, or indeed whether we're at the point where you might want to kind of draw out some takeaway messages.
So the one thing that I wish that I'd done more of, particularly earlier on, I sort of somehow imagined that my line manager always sort of knew what I was looking to do next, or what opportunities that I might be interested in. I don't know why I thought that they would be able to do that, but I somehow thought that, you know, if they thought that I was ready for something, they would sort of then magically be able to give it to me. And I wish I'd realised this point a lot earlier, that actually you need to, you know, have an open discussion with your line manager, to actually talk about what you want and what you'd be interested in, and if something came up, whether they would look out for things on your behalf. And you know, that's the thing that I would take away now, that I wish that I'd realised earlier. You know, they're not mind readers, yet you do actually have to give some indication of the things that you might be interested in.
That's a lovely message, Mel, and I think it's probably a common misunderstanding that people assume that their line managers will take care of their careers and don't have the conversation. And what I'm thinking is really, it's up to each and every one of us to take ownership for what we want to achieve with our careers, and to have that conversation with our line managers and others who might be able to support us. So that's a lovely message. Thanks very much, Mel, and thank you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Thank you.